Oh hi, it's been a year, hasn't it? Well, I'm 17 years old now, and I took over this compound area. We have a blunt for a day, and I'll show you around. It's not much, but it would do. Hey boss. Hey boss. Hey guys. This is my studio here, like my own home studio area. These are where my men live. Over here, then up here is my actual place. Right here. Kitchen, then table, lounge room, then my bedroom. Gang gang. Hey son. Oh hey dad. Your sister's pregnant by the way. Okay. Do we know if we're having a daughter or you're having a daughter and a son? Guess what? We're here in Chicago. What about you? I'm in Detroit. Cool. Yeah, you know. Cool. See dad. See son. Hang up. Gang gang, you heard. I'm 17 now. What's on YouTube? Yeah, buddy. Gang gang, you fucking heard me, kid.
Minecraft creature of pure terror.
So what?
It's been around in the
What's
Minecraft
this?
universe long before the first Minecraft players ever existed. But now he's on a mission to hunt all of these players down. How did this terrifying creature come into existence?
Let's pause that. Let's go chill in here, can. Let's chill up here. Then let's chill here, dog. Press play.
Why did it want you so badly? Find out as we see. Billions of years ago, this dimension was once a very peaceful place, filled with life of all different varieties and many beautiful landscapes. Well, that's how it used to be, as that all changed on one winter night, as the great spirits that were meant to protect their world and keep life thriving on it had been corrupted, and now they wanted destruction and power. And so, in a matter of seconds, these spirits consumed the world, warping it from a lively dimension with millions of inhabitants to an empty wasteland. And now that spirit, with the power of that entire dimension, became the most powerful being in the entire Minecraft universe. Something needed to be done to stop it, and quickly, or else this being would start to go to other dimensions, and they too would become a victim of its destruction. And that's when the null arrives. You see, back when the great ancestral spirits were creating the dimensions in Minecraft, they knew that most of the spirits would do good, and would actually follow through with their duties of protecting their worlds. But they also knew that a few may turn their backs on the spirits and the worlds that they were meant to protect, and try and take the world's powers for themselves. And so, to reduce the threat level of any being that was actually able to do that, they created a self-destruction switch for all worlds. And that switch, when activated, would cause an empty expanse of nothingness to rise and consume that dimension and any remaining life. Now, that may sound devastating, but do keep in mind that this would only happen once an entity or spirit had already gotten to a point of no return in their attempt at consuming all the powers of that world, and this expanse would just stop them from continuing and hurting other worlds. Also, this expanse of nothingness was so powerful that even the great spirits would be killed by it. As for this nothingness's name, well, it was known by many as the Void, and it was placed in every single dimension by the spirits hidden deep underground, waiting to be activated. So now, in the very rare case that a spirit corrupts and tries to take the powers of their world for themselves, the Void is activated and it consumes that greedy spirit. And so that's just what happened to that spirit on that world billions of years ago. That world was consumed by the void, and the universe was saved from another power-hungry god. So, fast forward a few billion years. At this point, the void has been able to stop the growth of hundreds of these power-hungry spirits and save the Minecraft universe many times. But it was then that it was starting to realize a pattern, and that was that all of these spirits that would go on to corrupt and want to take control of their worlds all had one thing in common, and that is that they'd all had an interaction with a player-like being just before they'd been corrupted. So, the void, which had been created to fix this godly problem of greed, came to the conclusion that all of these players that have the potential to see spirits must be taken away, so that way the spirits would never corrupt, and thus the void would never have to rise, causing the end of another innocent dimension. But if the void wanted to remove players, it was going to need a physical formation in order to do so. That's because it couldn't just rise to the surface, which would kill off the player, because that would also in effect kill off everything else. So instead, the void created its formation, which was very reminiscent of a player, but this formation was pure black, just like the void itself. And just like the void, this formation was freezing cold. And so this brand new freezing being was sent out on a mission by the void, a mission of hunting down every single player that presented even the slightest of threats of encountering that spirit. And as this formation would go through hunting down these players, all from a distance, many times it would never actually have to act, as the players would remain not a threat, and so it would move on to the next players. However, sometimes, whilst observing from a distance, the being would see that these players become a threat, and so it would attack, removing that player from its world. But while it would do that, occasionally, a villager or some entity equivalent from another world would watch this thing attack their beloved players and take it away, never for them to be seen again. And so stories and legends began to spread about that thing that took these players away, and that thing was very feared amongst every creature of every world. No one liked this thing, but soon they did give it a name, and that name was the Null. Millions of years pass, and the legend of the Null continues to grow and haunt players forever, until one day you arrive in the overworld. And you, oblivious to the terrifying legends of the Null, continue with your normal activities, from exploring the deepest caverns, to climbing the tallest mountains, to farming endless wheat. Whatever you wanted to do, you did without any fear of the Null. But little did you know that the Null has always been watching you, and you should have been afraid. But luckily he would continue watching most of you indefinitely, never acting. But not all of you are so lucky, as some of you would do something that the Null deems as high risk for you giving up your powers to the spirits, which could result in a dimensional destruction if that spirit chooses to take those powers, the exact thing that it was made to stop. And so at that moment he reveals himself to you, and he starts to you are frozen.
Instantly, from files to apps, even answers online. Who says you can't have everything? With one little button. Switch to finding things instantly. Switch to Chromebooks.
You are still frozen. However, you suddenly thaw out, and you, the Steve, are awoken in a dark dungeon in an unknown dimension. The only lights there were very dim redstone torches, so Steve gets out a torch and drops it down, and what he sees is shocking. Thousands, if not tens of thousands, of these player beings, all frozen in place within this dungeon, all probably victims of the Null from other universes. He spends a while looking in awe and confusion at these players, wondering why they're all here. He didn't know yet. He hadn't heard of the legends. And so Steve walks ahead, looking for answers and a way to help all these victims. But eventually, he reaches a dead end, and there's a sign. Help me, the Null is near. Steve is really happy to see that sign, because it means someone else has thawed out, even if they were in danger. But as he turns his head, he sees it. A skeleton still holding the ink used to write that sign. His happiness turns into sadness. He is all alone. Or so he thought, as the Null had just brought back another victim from another universe when he saw the melted ice of the Steve's cage. Immediately, the Null went running down the corridor looking for the Steve, and he sees him looking down at the sign. He goes in for an attack. Steve sees that at the very last second and tries to run away, but it's too late. The Null attacks, and everything goes black. Steve opens his eyes again. He is now floating on the bedrock in the middle of the sky, alone and vulnerable. He has no way to get down without falling to his death. But before he can think what to do, he comes face to face with the Null again. He goes to draw his sword, ready to attack and avenge all the victims. But before he can, the Null speaks.
You are the bait for the universe's most deadly threat.
And then the Null destroys that bedrock. Now, as the Steve is falling, you may be wondering, why did the Null set you up to catch some other being? And well, to understand the true threat of that being and why the Null wanted it, you'll need to watch this video. Entity 303, one of the most feared yet mysterious beings in Minecraft. It's known for being a ghostly figure that haunts your worlds and corrupts them. So, join me as we dive deep into the story of Entity 303. Long ago, the Minecraft universe was empty. There was no overworld, no nether, no end. Nothing existed back then. And it was like that for trillions of years. And that was mainly due to sheer dumb luck. You see, this civilization lived on the outskirts of the world, which meant that when the event happened, they had time to run, gather important items, and stay hidden. So, while there may have...
Pause it. Head to bed. Wake up. Just another day. Gang gang. My room. My room. I forgot where's my room, yo. My room. Here. My room. Ah, here. Let's head to my room. Right, you know what I fucking mean. See you in the morning. 7 in the morning. Just another day. Gang gang. Rag school cunt. Let's go chill here again. Press play.
Lots of destruction in the realms. There was still hope. And now it could be the ample opportunity to rebuild what was lost and create something great. But there was a slight problem.
A bunch for that, yo.
Now, the dragons were the strongest creatures in all of the realms. But for many years prior to its destruction, they had been forced into hiding, as they would be constantly hunted down by many of the original civilizations who lived in the realms. But now, with that explosion happening, and with many of the dragon hunters being killed, these dragons were finally free to roam the world. But now that they had their freedom, they wanted to keep it. And so they began to attack the Shockrites and the Warpers.
Being a hawk asks for balance.
Now that they had their freedom, they wanted to keep it. And so they began to attack the Shockrites and the Warpers, just in case they were planning on attacking. And even though these were both very strong creatures, alone neither of them could defeat a single dragon. And as such, many of the Shockrites and the Warpers were killed by the dragon. And so, after many months of the dragon's uncontested reign, both the Shockrites and the Warpers were on the edge of extinction. And so, as a final attempt to stay alive, they united into one group. And so, the first thing that this newly united group did was that they constructed large fortresses all across the outer rim of the end that would protect them from the dragon's attacks. Also, within these fortresses, the Warpers and the Shockrites would farm a lot of beetroot, as that was the only crop that they would be able to grow now that the entire dimension was destroyed and the atmosphere was different. And these fortresses would also be a great place for the Shockrites to store any valuables that they had been able to gather and keep them safe. Finally, together, they decorated these fortresses with banners representing their unification. And so, if you haven't guessed already, these fortresses, well, they were the End Cities. So, now that they had created a good base to work from, they began to fight back against the dragon. The plan here was that they would construct large floating boats, as the dragon could fly and being in the air would allow for easier access to hit the beast. Then they would target each individual dragon one at a time, as that way it would be more likely that they could kill them. And so they started to execute on their plan. And after only a few years, much to their delight, most of these dragons were killed, as their plans had succeeded. Now, with all these dead dragons, they did a few things. First, they took their heads and they placed them at the front of their ships to scare off any other dragons. Then they also used any poisonous breath left behind from these beasts to make potions. And then finally, and most importantly, for each dragon, they were able to create something of very high use. This item had to be very meticulously created, and there could only be one for every dragon slain. And this item was none other than the Subscripture, the Elytra. And these were by far the most prized possessions of these people, and as such, they were kept safe and secure inside the floating ships. Now back to the dragon hunt. At this point, all but one of the dragons had been killed, and that dragon was called Jean, and she lived in the center islands of the End. Now, they couldn't just go there and kill her, because she was, well, different. She was the Ender Dragon. Now, what that meant was that she was able to absorb massive amounts of energies from the Warper's power outbreak, which meant that she was much more defended and much stronger, and she was a dark magic wielder. Overall, a very powerful creature, and so they were going to need a different strategy for getting rid of her. But just as they were thinking of a way to do that, something caught their attention. There was a plant growing in the lifeless land of the End. Now, obviously, they were all skeptical at first, but eventually they decided to investigate. Now, the Warpers, well, they were reluctant to try anything grown here other than their trusted beetroots. But the Shockrites, well, they gave it a go, and it changed everything. You see, that plant was the chorus fruit, and it allowed them to teleport, which was actually one of the Warpers' old abilities that had been lost to the realm. But now it had somehow been infused into this plant. And so, when they saw this, they were forced to put their plans for attacking Jean on a staggering halt. As the few Warpers that had seen this plant and tried it knew that they had to show everyone. And so, for the next few months, the Shockrites and the Warpers spent their time spreading the chorus fruits all over the End Islands, until everyone had access to it. But by the time that happened, something strange occurred. They started to evolve, and quickly, because they were both only eating the chorus plants, and so the Warpers were changed, as they had been able to fully regain their ability to teleport. And when that happened, they became taller, thinner, and stronger, and their eyes turned back to purple, with all their power that they had regained. And so the Warpers transformed into what we recognize today as the Endermen. Now, as for the Shockrites, they weren't affected in as much of a positive way. You see, the Shockrites, now with the ability to teleport, no longer needed to walk anywhere, which meant they no longer had the need for their legs, and they also didn't need any arms anymore, thanks to the new attack that was given due to these new powers. And so it began to shrink to conserve energy. Now, in that shrunken form, they were very weak, so the Endermen tried to give them a protective coating to stay safe. And once they'd done that, the Shockers had been created. But now the Shockers were stuck in place, and as such they were unable to move these floating ships to the center island. But what that really meant was that if the Endermen really wanted to get rid of all the other dragons, they were going to have to fight Jean alone. And so they used their teleportation ability to get to the center island, and they began their attack. Except that was a complete failure, as Jean was a dark magic wielder, and so she was able to hypnotize some of these Endermen, and she forced them to build massive towers to protect her and heal her. And then, once they had done that, she created small portals for the Endermen to be sent away back to the End Islands. But once the Endermen were sent back, they had also forgotten what had just happened. So they woke up to seeing these strange portals, and their curiosity got the better of them, and they ventured back inside, and it took them back to Jean, the Ender Dragon. But when they returned, she didn't attack them, because in reality, she wasn't a bad dragon who wanted to kill anyone. Really, she just wanted her last egg to hatch in peace and not be hunted down. And so, when the Endermen saw that, they realized they were just a massive problem to this world, and so they wanted to fix the problems that they had created. And as such, they agreed to help her find a better, brighter place for the baby dragon to be born. And so, the Ender Dragon sent them back to the Nether and the Overworld in an attempt to do so. But obviously, Jean didn't 100% trust the Endermen, and so she also secretly sent some ghost-like dragon observers to watch over the Endermen, just to be safe they were being truthful. And those observers were the Phantoms. But the Phantoms weren't the only creation watching over a valuable item. After all, there are the Guardians, who were... But you'll need to watch this video to find out those secrets.
Can you tell me if this dog food's any good?
No.
No, you can't, or no, it's not.
Hey, buddy. Gang gang.
battle, were finally forced to enter their own dimension. However, this journey to the new dimension was quite a costly one, and that cost came in the form of the loss of the Warpers' strong powers, which also caused the Warpers to be mutated from strong humanoid warriors to thin, fragile creatures, with the only magic remaining inside them being used up to regain a poor eyesight and a much weaker ability to teleport. And that thin creature is what we now recognize today as the Enderman. And that dimension they created, well, that was the end. Also, all that magical essence that the Warpers lost.
Blast away hay fever with Dimmerson Allergy and Hay Fever Relief.
There's something hiding deep beneath the world of Minecraft. If you spend your time in the relative safety of the surface, you may never find it. The peaceful villagers, the livestock, the wandering traders, all of these go about their daily lives, oblivious to what lies beneath their very feet. Yet, ignorance does not change the facts. There's something really strange going on deep underground. As we explore, we find a biome called the Deep Dark. It contains a squishy and shimmering material known as skulk. But these deep dark biomes are more dangerous than they first appear. If an adventurer is not careful, they can summon the Warden, a beast of such power and violence that it dwarfs all other overworld foes. Yet, despite this looming danger, in the deep dark we find remnants of ancient cities, outposts built with the Warden in mind. Why would someone knowingly accept the risks to build these places? Why is there a mysterious structure at the center? How does skulk work? And what exactly is the Warden? To answer these questions, we are going to need to take a deeper look at the deepest biome. And there's only one way to do that. Join me for a dive beneath the waves.
Pause it. Head to bed. Look it back up. Another day wagon school con. Unlock it. Hey boss. Hey boss. Hey guys. Welcome back up. Gang you heard. Let's go out here, can. Actually, let's go to in here. Gang you heard. Let's go to here, can. Next to my crib. Press play. The buffer died.
To understand the Warden, we need to first understand the location in which the Warden can be found. Deep dark biomes spawn somewhat rarely underground. Upon visiting them, we notice that they're covered with a strange material called skulk, a substance found nowhere else in the game. Skulk is not just a block, it's a category of them, with several that are related but have different properties and functions. Let's take a look at each of these. The most basic skulk block is, well, skulk. It's by far the most common. It has dark blue shimmering dots on the surface, and the sounds tell us that this is a squishy block. Just take a listen. The audio-visual elements are immediately intriguing, but things get weird quickly when we actually break the block. Instead of skulk dropping itself, something quite unexpected comes out of it. Experience. At first, this seems impossible. We may be tempted to think that experience is just a gameplay element designed to provide progression to the player. Yet, it turns out that there is strong evidence that experience is a physical quantity within the Minecraft world. Magic in Minecraft is strange, but it's not random. When we enchant a weapon at an enchanting table, experience stored within the player is used and converted into the enchantment. It's actually possible to go backwards too. A grindstone converts enchantment into experience. Another key property is that energy can be transferred between beings. This is most commonly when killing a mob. Upon its death, raw experience is dropped and can be picked up by the player. The exact same thing occurs when the player dies. interpret these phenomena is to consider experience as some sort of magical energy. Much like real-life energy, it cannot be created or destroyed, it only changes forms. The enchanting process is one such example of a form change. However, this experienced energy can also take a different form, known as soul energy. In the Nether, we find a special block called soul sand. We can see that there appear to be several screaming souls on the texture. If the soul speed enchantment is used on boots, a player can travel faster on soul sand. During this process, we see an animation. It's some sort of being that writhes and turns as if it has escaped a trap. It starts brown, apparently covered in sand. As it rises, it reveals its true color, a beautiful light blue. Then it fades away. This could be an actual soul. We know that it's capable of doing physical work in the world, such as causing the player to move faster. The soul animation could therefore be interpreted as an indication that the energy contained within the souls is being used. These souls can also be burned, producing a soul fire which is much hotter than regular fire, as well as providing nutrients for nether warts to grow. I call this phenomena soul energy, and it's shown up extensively throughout the Minecraft world. Soul energy and experience are both different versions of the same basic energy. Check out this video if you want to learn more. This brings us back to Skulk. It appears as though Skulk is somehow storing this energy. The Skulk block contains it, and when they break, the energy is released. This leads logically to another question. How did the Skulk obtain this energy in the first place? We find the answer in the form of a different block, called the Skulk Catalyst. Visually, it's fairly similar to normal Skulk, but it has the addition of a strange, bony section reinforcing the edges. Skulk Catalysts are benign. That is, until a mob is killed near one. When that happens, a complicated set of events occurs in quick succession. Did you miss it? Let's go to the RG and Super Mode camera and slow this down. When the mob is killed, the Skulk Catalyst shows a circular puddle on top, emanating from the central point. Then, several souls are released. They swirl and escape, dissipating into the air. Simultaneously, at the location where the mob died, some blue droplets appear. They move around and search for a non-Skulk block. When they find one, they pop, and generate new Skulk at that location. This catalyst action appears, at first, to be difficult to interpret. However, if we remember what we learned about soul energy and experience, a picture comes into view of what's happening. Skulk Catalysts are capable of taking soul energy from dead mobs and storing it in Skulk blocks. Notice how the soul particles from the catalyst are nearly identical to those of the soul sand, but instead of escaping brown sand, they escape bluish Skulk. The bubbles that generate Skulk contain these souls as well. Right before the bubbles pop, you can just barely see the edge of the soul inside. This is the moment when it is converted into the experience and stored in the block. In fact, if you listen very closely, you can make out the sounds of the souls being used by the catalyst. Furthermore, upon breaking a Skulk block, you can barely hear what seems to be these souls screaming. This, in and of itself, is a process that we haven't really seen anywhere else in Minecraft. But simple storage is barely scratching the surface of the power of Skulk. The catalyst has a few other capabilities as well. Upon the death of a mob, there's a 90% chance that the Skulk block is generated, thus leading to the majority of Skulk blocks being of this basic variety. However, there's a 9% chance that something else generates, a different type of block called a Skulk sensor. Skulk sensors are half-sized blocks that are visually similar to basic Skulk. They have tentacles protruding from the surface. These tentacles are specialized sensors capable of detecting a special stimulus called a vibration. There are a multitude of possible vibrations, including actions such as walking, eating, breaking a block, and opening a container. For most purposes, it's sufficient to think about if an action makes a sound. If it does, then usually a vibration is produced and can be detected by a Skulk sensor. Upon detection, the Skulk sensor lights up and the tentacles become more excited. However, Skulk sensors do have a weakness. Wool has the property of being able to absorb vibrations, thus preventing the sensor from activating. Sneaking also does this, removing the vibrations produced by the sensor. This is already a much more advanced use of soul energy that the catalyst has created. But the Skulk catalyst can do one final thing once out of every 100 times it activates. It can generate a special block called a Skulk Shrieker. The Shrieker is quite striking. On some level, the base of it appears to be made of Skulk. It's dominated by 4 jagged tooth-like protrusions, once again made of the same bony material seen on the catalyst. The proverbial cherry on top is the surface, where we can see 2 souls swirling. Clearly, this block has an exceptionally high amount of soul energy contained within it, and as a result is capable of doing some truly unique things. The skulk shrieker is sensitive to vibrations from skulk sensors. If the player produces a vibration, such as by walking, skulk sensors will detect this vibration and send it to the shrieker, which has no way to detect vibrations by itself. In this way, a group of skulk sensors can act as a sensing network for shriekers. So, what happens when the shrieker is activated? Well, it shrieks. The souls contained within cry out into the air with a blood-curdling screech, accompanied by some blue particles rising from its jaws. Then, something stunning. A single heartbeat sound shrouds any nearby players in darkness, a status effect that severely reduces the ability to see. The skulk shrieker is clearly another step up in terms of complexity. Yet, once again, it's powered by the soul energy, to the extent that we can see the souls doing the work. We're starting to see a progression. The death of mobs causes the catalyst to produce skulk sensors and shriekers. Sensors help alert shriekers to nearby players, and once alerted, these shriekers activate. But inflicting darkness is not the only purpose of the shriekers. If a player activates a shrieker 4 times in short succession, then something different happens. Something so unexpected as to be jaw-dropping. From the skulk will emerge the most formidable beast in Minecraft, the fabled Warden. The Warden is a powerhouse in every sense of the word. It possesses a ludicrous 250 hearts of health, equal to the Wither and the Ender Dragon combined. It is completely immune to fall damage, fire, and lava. Its defense is rivaled only by its offensive capabilities. A swing of its arms deals a whopping 22.5 hearts of damage on hard mode, the highest non-explosion damage in the game. Oh, and it also disables shields for 5 seconds. But the problems for a monster hunter don't end there. The Warden has managed to weaponize vibrations, producing a ranged sonic boom attack that hits at a distance of 20 blocks. It may be a more advanced version of a Skulk Shriek, given the visual similarities. This attack deals 7.5 hearts of damage, bypassing shields, armor, and enchantments. But even that's not all. Much like the Shrieker, the Warden is also capable of producing darkness. This essentially puts the target on the same playing field as the Warden, eliminating the advantage of sight. And it is indeed an advantage, for the Warden is totally blind. It's completely unable to see any of its targets. It does, however, have a sense of smell. It also has skulk sensor tentacles, meaning that it's capable of receiving vibrations, including signals sent by skulk sensors. In other words, these sensors help guide the Warden to its targets. When there are a lot of sensors, the Warden is increasingly effective. But this shares the same disadvantages, namely the ability for wool and sneaking to suppress vibrations. Wardens are extremely aggressive. They'll target and kill just about anything that produces vibrations, be it a harmless bat, a wandering trader, or a marauding player. More than any other mob, Wardens seem especially equipped to kill as much as possible in as short of a time as they can. Their arsenal of powerful ranged attacks, melee attacks, status effects, and defense is nearly undefeatable, and rivaled perhaps only by the Wither. How is the Warden so strong? We can get some insight by examining it visually. First, we notice that it contains a plethora of skulk elements. This includes the aforementioned tentacles, as well as the bony reinforcement block. But the real key is found within its chest. Much like the Skulk Shrieker, we can see that, embedded within its ribcage, there are several glowing souls. This is what powers the Warden. The Warden contains an extremely high amount of soul energy. This concept is boosted by the sounds of the Warden. Several of their noises have, in the background, the ethereal tones of souls that we've heard in other Skulk components. Furthermore, the souls pulse alongside the heartbeat of the Warden, indicating that these souls are the life force powering the beast. We should not gloss over the importance of this. The Warden is the culmination of the collection of soul energy from dead beings. The Catalyst has produced increasingly advanced capabilities. First, soul energy was stored. Do not spawn naturally elsewhere. Clearly, whoever built this place had discovered a thing or two about redstone. The influence of the Warden is felt throughout the city. For example, there's a small stand-alone statue that appears to be in the same basic shape as the large frame. The barracks have a similar feature in the center. Other Warden-centric design elements are less conceptual and more practical. The upper and lower walkways are covered in wool, meaning that they will not produce vibrations for the Warden. There are also many elevated areas and towers. The Warden does not climb ladders, so these places offer some relative safety.
You know that studio where we should go to? It's not just me what goes there. There's plenty of people go there. But I didn't say it before, You know what I mean?
The chest
Not
also
just
contained
me.
night vision suspicious
But
stew,
go to that
another
studio.
darkness counter.
Since I have my own studio
Balls,
now,
which generate
I don't
vibrations
have
that
to go
distract
there
the
now.
warden. Furthermore,
I got my own
switch
studio
stick
in this
books, which
compound.
make the anti-vibration
Gang, gang.
sneaking action faster and more useful. There are even leggings ready to be enchanted. Whatever the purpose of this city, one part of it seems obvious. It's designed specifically to manage the warden, be it by the wool, the candles, or any of the other multitude of defenses. However, there's a more subtle truth embedded within this larger one. Whoever built this city was aware of the warden and had a solid understanding of it, knowing specifically what to construct in order to protect against it. By extension, the builders of the city also had an understanding of skulk. We can see that they used skulk sensors within the construction of the central island. Chests also contain skulk blocks and sensors, as well as the hose required to mine it quickly. This evidence implies that the city was built as a response to skulk, not the other way around. But there's an obvious question which we should not ignore. Who actually built these places? Well, there are a couple things to notice. First, we see that, throughout the city, there are locations that have dark oak, torches, as well as blue, light blue, and cyan wool. It turns out that these are some of the signature building blocks of the Illagers, a group containing the Pillagers, Vindicators, and Evokers. Their building style is most easily seen in the elusive woodland mansions. The main structure is built out of dark oak wood and planks. Furthermore, there's an entire room full of blue wool, the same colors of wool that we see in the ancient cities. It therefore seems pretty likely that the Illagers were at the ancient city at one point in time. But did the Illagers actually build the city? If we look in more detail, we notice that these dark oak components do not make up the vast majority of the structure. Instead, they appear to be mostly used as repairs, rebuilding staircases, fixing bridges, reconstructing towers, and adding additional wool for protection. Most of the city is built from deep slate blocks, a material that we never see the Illagers use anywhere else, nor do they have any history of candles or soul lanterns. We can therefore conclude that the Illagers did not build the ancient cities. Rather, they discovered them more recently. We can see additional evidence for this if we look at the camp structures. These are inundated with the same colors of blue wool, as well as dark oak logs. There are even campfires. Illagers are known to construct small wool camps in their outposts. It's not implausible that they did the same thing in the cities. This all suggests that these were temporary locations, places for the Illagers to safely camp while they explored the ruins. It is likely that the ancient cities were instead constructed by a group called the Ancient Builders. These were an intelligent humanoid species responsible for a wide variety of the overworld structures, such as the desert pyramids. The Ancient Builders were powerful and prolific, sailing the seas, discovering the nether, and teleporting back and forth from the end. Yet, they underwent a mass extinction event, turning into zombies and skeletons that we see in the overworld today. We can further confirm that the Ancient Builders were the ones who constructed the cities by cross-referencing the loot table with Illager and Builder structures. Of the overlap, there are far more items found in Ancient Builder structures compared to Illager structures. It was not the Illagers who built these cities, but a more ancient society, one that is long gone. Yet, despite the fact that they did not build them, the Illagers were clearly here at one point. If there's one thing we know about the Illagers, it's that they're extremely curious. Their mansion is full of various experiments and oddities. If the Illagers discovered the ancient city, then they surely had many of the same questions that we have about its overall purpose. This leads us to an intriguing framework. Could we follow the thought process of the Illagers to help us discover the purpose of these cities? Perhaps we don't need to figure out everything ourselves. Let's use those that came before us to help us out. To start, we need to recognize that the Illagers did not repair indiscriminately. Dark oak wood is a scarce material deep underground, and they would have given some consideration to which repairs were sufficiently worthwhile to implement. In other words, to figure out the most important parts of the ancient city, we should examine which parts the Illagers decided were the most important. As we may have expected, this eliminates several places like the sauna and the barracks. These can be taken at face value. They do exactly as one might expect. Even the bizarre icebox is that way. It was seemingly little more than a storage location for snowballs and food. On the flip side, though, repairs draw attention to some critical details about how the city is designed. Most of the walkways in the city have wool to prevent detection by the warden. In the places where the Illagers repaired these walkways, they also used wool, thus ensuring that there is no change in the safety of the walls. But one path is different. There's a main walkway leading up to the city center that does not have wool anywhere. This walkway contains 8 bridges that lead perpendicularly to 8 pillars. Notably, some of these collapsed bridges have been repaired by the Illagers, and they too did not use wool. We can therefore conclude that the lack of wool on this particular pathway is important to the design. The central walkway leads upstairs directly to a wall surrounding the city center. The center is elevated beyond this wall, creating a several-block-wide moat. This moat can be entered on each side using the wooden pathways that lead directly into it. However, the illagers have constructed a bridge from the main pathway over the moat, leading directly to the top of the central island. It's subtle, but we can just make out the remnants of a stone bridge. This apparently was a feature of the original design. There are some intriguing implications of this setup. The lack of wool in the path indicates that a warden would be able to sense if someone was walking there, thus making these paths extremely unsafe. However, we must note that the bridge itself, as reconstructed by the illagers, is only 2 blocks high, thus ensuring that the warden can never reach the central island. Things get strange